I'm Clint Pumphrey. I'm the manuscript curator and head of special collections at Utah State University. For about 4 years, Chase and I have been working to put together a collection of historical materials related to outdoor recreation and the outdoor industry that we've branded, here we go, the Outdoor Recreation Archive. Most notably, this includes our catalog collection, which includes more than 3,500 outdoor gear catalogs from nearly 700 companies dating from 1900 to the present. You may know this collection from the really great Instagram account that Chase maintains. But we're moving into other types of materials as well. And we now have a growing collection of business records, correspondence, sketchbooks, and other documents and photographs from industry pioneers and designers. I could talk about the work that we do on this archive all day, but I'm actually here to visit with some of my colleagues at brand archives that are doing really great work preserving the history of their companies. So today I'm joined by Tracey Panek at Levi Strauss, Dave Moore at Carhartt, and hopefully we'll get Hilary McLeod from Patagonia on here in a minute. They're going to share with you a little bit about their collections, explain why archives are so important to their brands. So through this conversation, kind of to reiterate what Chase said, we really hope to convince folks out there who work for brands that you should really start preserving your heritage through archives work. So just to get started, let's just kind of get to know our panelists and their archives. So Tracey, if we could start with you, why don't you just tell us a little bit about your facility, your staff, and your collections?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Hello, everyone. Good morning from the San Francisco Bay Area. Thanks for having me, Clint and Chase. It's great to be part of the conversation. I am a part of a mighty team of two permanent staff in our archives. There's myself, the historian and director of the archives, and then my partner in crime, Laura O'Hara, who is our archivist. We often have contractors and interns who work with us, and we do have an outside vendor who handles our digital tool that we use, but we do a lot of work, just the two of us. So for those of you who just heard the 30 from Disney, you can do it as well with a smaller group and staff. We have our archives has been around for 32 years. It was established in 1989 by the last CEO who was a family member, a Strauss family member. The great grandnephew of Levi himself was the CEO, Bob Haas, who hired my predecessor, the historian Lynn Downey, and set up the archives. So we've been around for quite a while as an archives. We have an extensive collection. The important pieces are kept on site in the room that's blue behind me that you can see. That includes a blue fireproof safe where we keep the oldest pair of blue jeans in the world, and everything from those to our climate sealed parkas from the 1950s. And we also have a lot of things off-site because it's such an extensive collection. Most of it is garments, and the largest item in the collection includes a Jeep, a Levi's branded Jeep that we have that we couldn't possibly fit in the space where I work. And then the smallest would be some rivets, copper rivets that were found at a ranch in Central California, along with pieces of china that were part of a roadside stand where Chinese workers worked near a limestone quarry. And then my favorite part of the collection, and then I'll turn it over to you, Dave, is a letter collection that we have from consumers. And one of my favorites is from 1939, a woman named Virginia Brookbush, who wrote a letter in 39 on this terrific stationery. It's got a picture of people outdoors around a camp, a fire at a camp. And she wrote that she operated with her family a saddle horse concession in Teton National Park, where every man, woman, and child, she wrote, wore Levi's. So that's a bit about us.
Thank you, Dave. You want to take a crack at it?
Yeah, sure. So I'm here in Metro Detroit, Michigan. So I work for Carhartt. We're based out of Dearborn, Michigan, and we're established in Detroit in 1889. So Levi's has a few years on us. But I came into Carhartt about 7 years ago as a contractor. The company was celebrating its 125th anniversary. And that was really where the motivation came from to start an official archive. So 125 years in is when we started that process. So I came in as a contractor initially just to I was actually still a grad student at the time in history and library science and archives. And I came in to basically just do a catalog of the collection, in a sense, not really a collection yet, just kind of what had been saved in closets and some museum displays throughout the headquarters and at other places. So really the initial motivation to start the archives at Carhartt was to have just kind of a record of what had been kept and what historical materials were around, so that people didn't have to go digging through boxes and digging through things to find what they needed. It had always been a company that was very proud of its history and history minded, but never had that kind of formal archive. But it became pretty clear pretty quickly that the company was very happy to have a resource, somebody who could do research, who could kind of put evidence around a lot of the things that were sort of oral tradition over the years. One example being just kind of the years that we had established and introduced certain garments. We had things that had legacies going back to the beginning of the company, others over 100 years. So really having somebody who had that subject matter expertise became pretty high demand pretty quickly. So much like Tracey, I am also a team of two. It's myself and then a contractor who works with me, a full-time contractor that works with me. And then we also have a ongoing internship program in the archives at Carhartt. So I think at this point we've hosted about 12 or 13 interns since we started 7 years ago, who have been instrumental to really establishing the archive, doing, cataloging and processing of materials, doing digitization, organizing things, all that kind of stuff. I would never be where I am without them. So we actually report up through the creative marketing department within Carhartt. But obviously I, serve a lot of different departments within the company. And we are very blessed and lucky to have just moved into our first climate controlled, custom designed archive space just over the last month or two, which is very exciting. So we're still working on kind of getting settled in there, but yeah, we have really just about everything you can imagine related to the history of the company. Obviously clothing, going back all the way to, our first style of overalls, introduced in the late 1800s, all the way up to crazy Southwest clothing from the 1990s, some of our early leather gloves from the early 1900s, but then also correspondence from our founder to his sales team and to others. Obviously catalogs and business records like construction records and blueprints for facility expansions and all that kind of stuff. So really just about everything under the sun. So yeah, that's kind of a little snapshot of what we have at Carhartt and kind of how we got started.
Excellent, thank you. And Hilary, glad you're here. We've just gotten started, so I'll give you a chance to jump in and just tell us a little bit about your facility and staff and collections there at Patagonia.
Okay, great. Yeah, sorry about the little technical scare there, but second time was a charm, luckily. Yeah, happy to be here in Ventura, California. I'm actually here in the archives right now. We have two buildings. One is 8,000 square feet, the one that I'm in now. We actually have access to a building next door to us that is 10,000 square feet, but we use about half of that for storage. So the main building that I'm in right now houses, we have conference rooms, desks, and really the majority of our collection and inventory, which, gosh, I think if we counted it up, we were thinking about it the other day, we're not only talking about tens of thousands, but hundreds of thousands of everything you can think of with correspondence, garments, shoes, hardware. We've got all of the private collection. We've got artwork. And really our story is kind of a quiet and unexpected beginning. Our two founders are still working in our group. It's a young archive. So they had a small team of people that were interested in collecting the history and protecting it. About 6 years ago, our archive was founded. And what's great about that is we still have the first pile jacket that was made was actually sewn by the archive manager. So we still have a lot of great connections within the company. I started here about a year ago, but I've been with the company for 17 years.
Dave, I think you touched on this a little bit, but Hilary and Tracey, where does the archive live in your company structure?
I'll jump in. We are part of marketing. We have been in marketing for the last 2 years. Before that, we were part of communications, the team that dealt with sharing out information. Although we serve virtually all parts of the business, that's where we sit.
We're actually under HR, which gives it a bit of a different feel. Although we work with marketers and our storytelling and impact department, we're not working under the marketing side of things on a daily basis.
Great. Here, a question I just want to throw out to the panel. What does a typical day look like for you and your work?
I can start. I'm laughing because, no days is typical, but it's one of the things I love about my work because every day is a little bit different. Maybe I'll just share what happened yesterday. I'm working heavily and probably most with designers. So yesterday we had a large donation from one of our designers, Q, that came in with 1970s parkas, and ski bibs, so a ski collection that we are adding to the collection. I do a lot of answer a lot of questions from the designers or share with them materials from images of earlier pieces or garments that they can use for inspiration. I do a lot of work with outside fans as well, who, in fact, about just under half of my requests come from the outside people who are writing to know more about their materials, and often it's through their questions that I acquire pieces, like a recent question that came in from someone in Portland, Oregon, a guy named Dave, who was at an estate sale and found 1920s Levi's hiking coat. And it was among some military pieces, and he wanted to know more, and we ended up acquiring that. I also do a lot of writing for the company as the historian. It goes out on our blog. This year, we're celebrating the 85th anniversary of our red tab that we've had on our products since 1936. And so I wrote a story about that and about a quirky town called East Tin Cup, Colorado, that had a giant barn with an outdoor Levi's sign on it. And also am the do a lot of after this presentation, I'm going to be doing a presentation for new employees at the company to tell them a little bit about what we do and do a lot of work with press. So that's a bit about work that I do.
Yeah, I think for me, it's a lot of the same kind of vein. There's always a variety every day. I think just I'll go up a little bit and just talk come from a general sense. It's really a mixture of what I would term in the trenches, traditional archival work, so that work of going out and finding new materials or soliciting donations from customers or working with other departments in the company to get materials transferred over to the archive that aren't being actively used anymore. Obviously, one of my favorite things, and I'm sure the others on the panel might agree is, the searching out, finding some of that old stuff that sort of fills in the gaps of product you might not have in your collection. So I do a lot of, obviously during COVID, it's been a lot on eBay, but I've always enjoyed going to, vintage stores or kind of connecting with vintage sellers through social media, that might have an eye out for things for me. So getting those new materials, and then really the nitty gritty archival work of, processing them, recording all the data about them into cataloging them so that I can search and find them when I need them, organizing them, preserving them, doing digitization. I mean, it's all the kind of, traditional archival tasks that you do. But again, more and more, as the archive has been established at Carhartt and more visible, it's sitting on project teams and strategizing about how we can bring the history into a new marketing campaign, just like Tracey, working with designers on how we can bring product, bring history and archival garments and details and things into what we're making now, which in some cases has been a straight up reproduction of an old garment that we've done, as a special edition model. But more often than not, it's patterns, graphics, those kind of things. Really kind of digging into the archives and finding cool, bits and pieces of the historical material that we can include in new product. Like a bunch of stuff we just released with our first camouflage pattern. So, it's all new stuff, but it's using that, inspiration from our original camouflage that we introduced in the 70s. And yeah, working with HR is a huge one for me, because we really are very focused on the mission of our founder, Hamilton Carhartt, really being established as a company that started with the end user. He went out talking to railroad workers in order to figure out how to build the best possible overall for them. So really working with HR, with new employees to reinforce that mission. And obviously it takes a million different forms today, but that's still how we operate and still what we do, is hugely important too. So, a typical day could be just about anything, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Same here. Such variety, which makes it really interesting. In fact, when I started, I was a brand archivist. That's how I came on. And I was doing, planning on accessioning, managing donations and donor relationships, oral history, loans, those kinds of communications. And then we were approved to secure a subscription for the TMS gallery systems and e-museum, which we're really excited about. And as you can imagine, that really shifted us into a high gear of getting that system configured and loaded. And therefore, with that came the need for some more resources. So we were able to grow our team. So kind of, remaining flexible and really shifting gears. I personally went into more of an operational role at that point. Job descriptions, getting people on board so that we can help get the system loaded. Therefore, our coworkers and the company can utilize it. So now my role is actually more about keeping the deck cleared so that the TMS team can do the really important work of loading the system, shooting garments. We're actually even trying to bring more people on to get that work done, because we've got hundreds of thousands of objects here that we need into the system. So yeah, just remaining flexible and enjoying the variety of whatever is going to come that day. It does change.
A number of you mentioned the collaboration you do with people in your company, and I'm really interested to dig a little deeper into that. Who do you collaborate with most often, and maybe tell us of a particularly successful collaboration that you've had with other folks in your company?
I can jump in. We've done a lot of collaborations with fashion brands, streetwear brands, for outdoor folks, everyone from Filson to Pendleton. But one of the more interesting recent collaborations was with Google, which might be a surprise, but we created one of the first wearable garments using copper wiring. We looked back to our early copper riveted 1800s jackets for inspiration when it came to that, but the jacket was wired so that it could be touch activated with a cuff with a copper wiring and with Bluetooth to connect to a mobile device, and you could use it. The jacket was intended to be worn if you were riding a bicycle outdoors. We called it Project Jacquard. And for most collaborations, it starts with a visit to the archives. We let the partner brands take a look. I'll share with them some of the earliest pieces and other pieces through the decades, so they have a sense of what our aesthetic is, what the design elements that are essential to include as they consider what part of their design they will use as well.
Yeah, I could jump in next. I would say that, internally, as far as, who I work with the most often, we're growing. The archive is really growing how much it works with product design. But the reason that I'm organized under creative marketing was because that was really the first department I was able to make an impact with, and I think that was because sort of the archive team was so small, as in it was just me, and so much of the product design work is obviously done so far out that it was easier early on to kind of make an impact with marketing because you were kind of closer to when the actual campaign was coming out or something was going to happen. So I could kind of see an opportunity and jump in. And one of the things that really was able to cement the value of the archives at Carhartt was in 2015 we worked on it, so just a year after we even first started establishing it, and then they were later released in 2016, was we were introducing a whole lot of new types of product that we had never done before. For instance, we were doing we were really growing our work with dry fit shirts. We were releasing a line that was called Force Extremes that was kind of this big step up in our dry fit clothing that we had only actually introduced only a few years before. So the idea behind the marketing, traditionally, of course, is, show the breakdown of it, show every little feature and all those things. But, what we decided to do was say, well, we're really trying something new. We're in a space where we're competing with a lot of companies that have been doing that sort of stuff for longer than we have. So we wanted to lean on our history to show that this might be a new type of technology that we're working with, but you can trust what we're doing because we have this long history of building quality products. So what we decided to do for the commercials for that new product was actually work with our product design department and the archives with product design to create patterns of these old, iconic pieces of Carhartt, to work with our sewing lab, for lack of a better term, down in Kentucky, who makes all our samples and prototypes and things like that, to actually literally recreate the old clothes and then film historical reenactments of scenes of people wearing, our iconic product throughout history. And we were actually lucky enough at the time to collaborate with Jason Momoa, who is actually directing those commercials, which was really cool. Everything from guys working on a farm all the way to a reenactment of the clothing we made for the military during World War I. So they were literally blowing things up and having a trench warfare scene recreated. So that kind of collaboration really made the impact with marketing to the point that we, that was really where we were working, and why the kind of the archive is organized under that department, because it was such a successful collaboration. And all of that footage we shot, which I'll talk a little bit later, but just like a lot of things in the archives, that's a huge return on investment, is a lot of the stuff is evergreen. We use that footage all the time as clips in different commercials. It's always something you can use because it's sort of agnostic of what exactly is going on right now. You always have that footage to use no matter what the purpose might be later.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about Patagonia's archive is that our team of now 10 people has combined years of experience at the company, equating to over 200. So the founding members are, 40-year, 35-year, 20-year plus employees, which really makes those internal connections and networking so strong. The team really knows their way around the company and has those connections. We're, as an archive, a lot of people reach into us from product design, merchandising. Our retail visual team comes to us for research. One of our team members, our curator, just finished an incredible display for our new Honolulu store. And it's not so much about Patagonia's history, it's the history of that store and where it sits in Honolulu. So we're constantly helping with making those connections, between retail and Patagonia. We also work with our facilities and buildings team. One thing that's on our plate right now is considering moving our archives, which, as you can imagine, that's a big undertaking. So there's a lot of collaboration right now going on, finding that next spot for us. Our storytellers, writers, what's the history of organic cotton, or story on fleece, or denim. What was our first denim piece? How long ago, did we start those products? Because there's a lot of history at Patagonia where products come back. They seem like they might be new, like our workwear collection, but it actually harkens back to like our stand-up pieces and some of those products. Externally, a lot of museums have reached into us. One that was really successful, and one of the first was the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. And they were doing a show called Fashion, it was Fashion is Modern, and it was selecting iconic fashion pieces from the past century. And they selected our snap tee, our Chinchilla snap tee, and it was featured in a book, and now we have that book. So there's been a lot of return on, I think Dave was mentioning just the return on investment with on the PR side and making those connections externally. I think at first it was a little time consuming, and we worried about working with museums and loaning pieces, took a lot of resources, but now we understand the value of that. Yeah.
Thanks. I just think it's so fantastic how much your companies have invested in preserving your heritage. And, but, I think sometimes there's a reason for that. And it's probably because of it's some benefit to the company. And so, what benefits does the archive have for the company? And, kind of in business speak, what's the return? What is that return on investment for the archives program?
I can take that. I really feel like the archives it's an important resource when we want to learn from our past, but it guides our future. And at Patagonia, as we consider how to grow our advocacy work and including more diversity and justice and anti-racism, it really provides for a critical direction for how we can evolve what we've done. So it's not just always repeating the past. Like Ed was saying, it's what do we want to, do differently in some cases. So as we consider new products, designers spend a lot of time here. They have spaces that they can come into and work and check out gear and or sit and do some reading or writing. So that's sort of tying back to the foundation, but also evolving. Also, as we face certain legal questions, the archives provides important answers to questions that, how have we handled things in the past? We have PR books, ads, we have huge room filled with binders on trademarks and how we've used products in the past. So I think in terms of like return on investment and, why a company would need an archive, that legal connection has been really valuable to us.
Yeah, I'll chime in. Thanks, Hilary. I think that you covered a lot of important points. It's an interesting question these days because there with things like FTPs and licensing or other kinds of things, there might be a way to monetize products or other things in the archives. But for us, we see it as an investment in everything from fan engagement to legal litigation. We certainly, as Hilary pointed out, can demonstrate our worth by being able to find and demonstrate our patent or trademark use from very early on. It also includes, the press work that we do, and there are formulas where you can calculate just how much value you can get in the stories that you share out, in a way to differentiate your products through being able to demonstrate how not only that they've been around for a long time, but just how long they last. So the quality that Dave also pointed to, all of those things are important ways for us to demonstrate the worth and the value of the archives. In addition to being able to something that's important to a lot of brands, demonstrate their authenticity by being able to go back to an archives and literally pull out a document that refers to or shows a pattern when it was first used, or an image where we can demonstrate first use or an unusual use of it. So lots of great benefits to having an archives.
Yeah, a lot of what I would say has already been said, really, as far as a lot of practical application like stuff. And what I would say, I will get a little philosophical on you, I guess. I think for us, being a company that really, our log line of today is, we're here to serve and protect all hardworking people. And on the surface, you have that statement and you have that claim, right? But without the archive, what are you really saying? You make that commitment, but without the evidence to go back to your earliest years, or to go back through your past and show how you're making a claim, but you have the material to back it up. We have Hamilton Carr writing about how he was out on the railroad visiting with these guys, talking to them, learning about what they needed out of their garments, and all of the evidence that we have throughout the past. And you bring that all the way forward to today with, our consumer insights people and our product R&D, and how they're always out on different job sites and looking at new professions we haven't analyzed before, how they work, how they move, what sort of, flexibility they need in their clothing, where their pockets need to be, all that kind of stuff. For us, within the company, it's such a source of pride to be able to go back to the beginning and say, that's what we were built on from the very beginning. We obviously evolve and change, and, you bring in new technologies and all sorts of crazy new fabrics and moisture wicking and flexible fabrics and all that kind of stuff. But it's always, really been a goal of mine to have the archive be that place that you can go and say, if we make this claim, we can back it up through our history, because we have the documents and the evidence and the old clothes and all that, to prove it. Not only the clothes that show, a nice pristine example of how something was designed in the first place, but also the clothes that have been returned from customers that they and maybe even a son or daughter or even a grandson wore for 20 years. And sure, they're beat up, right? But it took that long to get them to that point. So reinforcing the quality aspect of it too. So I think for me, that's always been kind of a North Star in how I've run the archive, is to say, we're here to show how things were started in the first place and how we continue that tradition today, that it's not just something we throw on a poster or a web banner and that's where it ends.
Yeah, thanks. I think those are just so great, such great reasons to invest in an archives program, and such a wide range of reasons too. I mean, from really tangible stuff to a little more intangible stuff. And so I appreciate that great defense of archives that you all gave. I'm curious, maybe, if we're people are starting to think, I want to start an archive. This sounds like something I want to get in on. what would be your advice to a company or who was looking to start an archives or history program?
Maybe I'll jump in. And first I need to correct something. It wasn't FTPs I was referring to, it was NFTs. It's so new, we're trying to learn about what those are. I have been on both ends. I joined Levi's when the archives was already about 25 years old, but I've also in prior work helped establish an archives, a bit like Dave. So I would say to start small. Ideally, you would be able to hire a professional archivist, but we are lucky at Levi's to have benefited from a lot of people who just saved things and put them together. And being able to do that is huge, an important start. You can get lots of resources from the Society of American Archivists, a professional organization that I belong to, and then there's a business archives section. A shout out to all of you out there who are with the section. And yeah, you can get lots of great information that way. You can, as I said, you can start small, build up, you can benchmark what other people are doing. We've heard already from a lot of folks visiting others, finding out what they do. And we're pretty good about supporting one another and liking to help folks. There's even an international organization of business archivists at Levi Strauss. We hosted a conference 2 years ago in San Francisco, and so if whether you're in the States or overseas, you can get help to get started.
Yeah, I'll jump in right there because I was able to attend that conference and it was absolutely fantastic and one of the best conferences I've been to, and also my first time in San Francisco, so that was also amazing. Yeah, I mean, obviously echoing a lot of what Tracey said. For me, when I first came in, it was really, if you're starting it, it's doing fact finding with the departments within the company. That was kind of the first thing I did. Obviously I came in and, I was under contract and all that. So, I was making sure to go through everything and be producing tangible records of, how much stuff I had gone through that week or whatever. But at the same time, just as important was meeting with, stakeholders that were identified within the different departments to be like, have you used the history in the past? Like where, what ways have you used it? What times have you wish you had known more? And what sort of topics that may have had to do with, or also actively, like, what are you creating? What are the sort of reports and documents and things that you create? So it was really trying to identify who was going to be, at least from the outset. Obviously we still work and try to bring in new people. I'm always trying to kind of like, be like, I've never really worked with that team. Like, I wonder if, I might reach out to somebody and say, what value do you think you could get out of working with the archive? But it was great to get our head around like what the wish list kind of was for getting a better conception of the history and the materials that had been saved. Was a huge thing for me when I first came in. I still reference a lot of those documents even now, these interviews and things that I did with key folks in marketing or product design or HR. And that, made a huge impact on the direction of the archive from the beginning, and really want to echo something that Tracey said, which is like, take it one piece at a time. It's especially for me in particular with 120 coming into a 125-year-old company at the time, which had no formal archive before, it was extremely daunting. And I'm definitely a little bit of a perfectionist and always, have one eye on the end goal. And, that the goal for me was just to try and not keep both eyes on that, to celebrate the little wins and all of those things. So, it can be what you want it to be and what you feel like you have the resources for it to be at the beginning, and it can become so much more later. And I think that's, coming up with kind of a strategic plan where you are like, what is the most pressing need? What are people really looking for to gain more knowledge about the history? Let's focus on that first and let's build out the rest of it later.
Yeah. Definitely start now. Get your older people, because I think, as Ed mentioned, unfortunately, you're going to miss some of them otherwise. as people pass away, other people have to tell their story. It's better to get someone to tell their own story if you can. Obviously, oral history, gathering as much information as people retire. That's something that our founders were able to do because they had those connections. They had so much given to them right away. They actually started with the taking things one thing at a time. They didn't have library science background, so they Googled and got books on archiving, and something that struck them was you can kind of go the tweezer approach or the shovel approach. And they were really trying to tweeze through everything, with special boxes and being careful of sunlight and gloves, which is important. But at the time, they actually needed to shift gears and just get the shovel out and start putting things into the archives. We were fortunate as a company that years ago we had a photographer who was working on a school project, Gary Register, and he photographed a lot of the early climbing days. And so we had that collection. We'd worked with Register to purchase that collection. And so a lot of our history on the early climbing days, we can catalog it and have those photographs. So anything that you have that you can kind of reach back, or history is being made right now. So start with photographs, oral history, friends, stories, donations. We've been using Teams instead of old-fashioned interviewing with a camera person in a room, mostly because of COVID. So utilizing, these kinds of platforms where you can actually do an oral history with somebody wherever they are, anywhere in the world. And it's not expensive and it can be transcribed. So starting to do those kinds of things now. Even if you don't have everything formalized, at least you're gathering the artifacts and the important pieces that you'll have for later.
Yeah, thanks so much. Really great advice. We're getting towards the end of the panel, but I just wanted to do a lightning round of a question that I get a lot myself in my work in archives, which is, what is your favorite thing in the archives?
I guess I'm sorry.
No, you go, Dave. I'm going to listen to yours.
Mine's pretty easy, actually. So I have a check in the archives from a store called Powers Clothing, which is in Jonesville, Michigan. It's kind of the middle of Michigan. It's a check from 1898 for an order of clothing from Carhartt, and that store is still there today, still family owned by the same family, and it still sells Carhartt. So that I love it just because obviously super cool old check, but at the same time, talk about bringing history forward to today, right? I mean, the relationship and all that, 123 years later. So that's my favorite.
Fun one. Thanks, Dave. A month after I started at Levi Strauss back in 2014, I got a phone call from a woman named Barbara and her daughter. They were about an hour away, and they asked if they could stop by the archives to see an early pair of overalls that Barbara had donated back in the 40s. And I was thinking, I wonder what she's talking about. She continued to describe it, and I knew exactly what it was. It is a pair that we keep in our fireproof safe. She had found it. It dated to 1890. She found it in a mine when she was out camping with friends in the 40s. They were teenagers at the time, and she took it home and wore it to high school. She patched it up and wore it to high school, and then brought it back. She was looking in the inside pocket bag and discovered our 2-horse trademark in the inside with a note that said, for over 17 years, our products have been made, blah, 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 and it goes on. But she realized they were a very early pair of Levi, so she wrote a letter to us and donated them. And being able to have that piece and know her story about the minor who would have worn it originally, and then the woman who wore it as a teen in the 40s was terrific. It's called Calico, and that's my favorite in the archives.
That's awesome. Mine is actually a large case that takes up practically a whole wall of a conference room we have here. It's the Marty Carabin collection. It houses almost every piece of Chouinard climbing equipment. It's 7 feet by 15. And it's not only just beautiful to look at and meticulous, it's truly a piece of art. But what I love about it is I'm now helping to manage the inventory on that collection specifically. So Marty is loaning this collection to us, and I'm working with him on identifying pieces and further diving into our archives of what we have. But it just reminds me every day of kind of how things circle around. And you can see the evolution of Chouinard equipment within this case, but here we are today, so many years later, and still talking about it, still touching things, still working on it, and making those connections and learning from it. And it just makes me smile every time I look at it.
Great. Thank you so much to our panelists for lending their insights. And I want to see if we have time, Chase, for a question or two for our panelists before we go.
Yeah, of course. Here's one. This seems like an archivist question, but what types of digital archiving systems are you using?
I'll share. We have something we call the Virtual Vault Digital Archives. It's a system that's run by our vendor Heritage Works, and we have in the first 6 months that I was at the company, we did a massive photo shoot and photographed everything on site, and that is what's in the system, along with a huge array of everything from advertisements in our catalogs to the letters that I described, like Virginia Brook Bush's and other pieces. It is what got us through COVID when we couldn't get into the archives. There are over 100, probably close to 150,000 digital assets in there, and it makes our work a lot easier.
Mine's pretty brief. We don't really have one right now. We're working on that right now, but we do store a lot of digitized archival material in our enterprise digital asset management system, which we call the Vault, which is provided by our vendor, which is Media Beacon. But it also houses all of our active photography and product shots and all that stuff as well.
Yeah, we're probably about a year plus out from being able to share our TMS gallery system e-museum that I mentioned earlier. But we've got the system, we are loading it currently. We're using it and being trained on it as the archivists in this building and the team members. But we're not fully up and running on that yet, and won't be for a while. But what's great about it and being on the ground floor is that as we are configuring the system, we're thinking through, what we need, because the system's actually set up more for artwork. The Getty uses it, for example. So we're sort of customizing it to our needs, and we're, as a team, small team, we're getting a lot of help from IT. A little shout out to our team there. That's really invaluable in helping us, get the fields in that we'll use ourselves. We've also networked with other companies like Adidas that has used the system, and trying to learn what they've learned from it, kind of going back to the earlier points of, checking in with other archives and getting as much help from them and experience, because we are all here to help each other through this. So, yeah.
Hilary, I will say you guys are doing a bang up job so far. Darcy gave me a sneak preview a few weeks ago of the system and it looks great. So you're doing great work.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. Darcy and Jody, and we've got a team on our IT side that's helping us, and we're really excited about it. And every time we show other team members or employees or leadership, we're sort of using that as our we need our plea for more resources, because they can see the value in having a system long term. There's only so much that our founding members can hold in their heads. We actually need to get it down into the system, so that people can leave their legacy that way.
All right, thank you so much. I'm getting the word that we need to wrap it up. So one more thank you to our panelists for joining us and sharing their knowledge and experience as working in corporate archives. Hopefully we've inspired some people today to pursue that in their own companies. If anyone has any other questions for the panel, I think Chase dropped our contact info in the chat, and so we would of course love to hear from folks and sounds like be of any help that we can.